The morning they escorted me out of the factory. I didn't fight it. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice or try to defend myself. I just picked up my toolbox. The same dented metal toolbox I had carried through those factory doors for 31 years. And I walked out, slowly, quietly, and standing near the entrance was the new operations manager. Pressed shirt, fresh promotion, brand new authority shining all over him. He watched me leave with a smile that never quite reached his eyes. And just before I stepped outside, he said, "Don't bother coming back, old man." I looked at him for a second. Then I nodded like a man who had already heard worse things in life than that. I got into my truck, started the engine, and drove away. And the truth is, I really didn't come back. Not that day, not that week, but exactly 19 days later. A letter arrived at the factory, not addressed to the manager, not to the CEO, not even to the board of directors. The letter was addressed to the building itself, and in the top left corner of the envelope, written neatly beside the return address, was my name. The same old mechanic they had walked out the front door. Inside that envelope was a letter from my attorney, and attached to it was a single document, a property deed, my property deed, for the land the factory had been sitting on for the last 26 years. Every machine inside that building, every office, every loading dock, every parking space employees pulled into every morning before sunrise. All of it sat on land that legally, officially, and completely belonged to me. What happened inside that factory over the next 48 hours, after that letter landed on the executive conference table, is something I have never told publicly before. Not to reporters, not to former employees, not even to most of my own family. But I'm going to tell you now. So stay with me. Because this story didn't end the day they escorted me out. That was only the moment they realized. They had no idea who they were talking to. My name is Earl Maddox. I'm 67 years old. And before this story goes any further, there's something you should probably know about me. I'm not a complicated man. I never went to college, never wore expensive suits, never sat in boardrooms giving presentations with polished slides and corporate buzzwords. I fix things. That's what I've done my entire life. Engines, hydraulic systems, conveyor belts, pressure valves, the kind of machinery nobody notices until it stops working and suddenly the entire building starts panicking. I grew up in Gadsden, Alabama, small enough that everybody knew your name, and usually your business too. My father was a machinist. His father worked iron or before him. The men in my family always worked with their hands. Not because we had no other options, because we believed honest work should leave marks behind. Grease under your fingernails, calluses on your palms, a back that aches at the end of the day because you earned your sleep. That's how I was raised. I started at Hargrove Manufacturing when I was 36 years old. Not young, not fresh out of school, not some ambitious kid trying to climb a ladder. I walked through those factory doors after spending 11 years at another plant in Anniston, a plant that shut down almost overnight when the parent company moved operations overseas. 312 people lost their jobs that week. I was one of them. And when you lose a job like that in your 30s, with bills, responsibilities, and people depending on you, gratitude starts to mean something different. So when Hargrove hired me as a senior maintenance technician, I showed up carrying something most men my age don't usually bring into a factory anymore. Real gratitude. The kind that makes you arrive 20 minutes early and leave 40 minutes late. Not because somebody's watching, but because you remember exactly what it feels like to suddenly have nowhere left to go. Hargrove Manufacturing was a mid-sized facility just outside Gadsden. They produced precision metal components for the automotive industry. Brackets, housings, assembly parts. Nothing glamorous, but important work. The kind of work that quietly keeps factories running across 3 different states while nobody outside the industry ever notices the name on the shipment. Back then, the plant was owned by a man named Gerald Hargrove. Gerald was 63 when I met him. Heavy set, slow to smile, but genuine when he did. He wore the same work clothes the rest of us wore, walked the floor every day, and knew every machine in that building by sound alone. I'm serious. That man could hear a motor change pitch by half a tone and tell you exactly which bearing was starting to fail before diagnostics ever confirmed it. He was old school in the best possible way. The kind of owner who knew what his employees ate for lunch and remembered their kids' names without needing someone from HR to hand him a file. We didn't talk much at first. Gerald wasn't the kind of man who forced conversation, but he watched people carefully. And I learned pretty quickly that the people Gerald Hargrove watched quietly were usually the people he trusted. About 3 months after I started, something happened that changed everything between us. It was around 6:15 in the morning, still dark outside. I was alone on the factory floor when the main press seized. And when I say seized, I mean dead. That machine was critical. Without it, the entire production line would shut down within the hour. Gerald's maintenance chief looked it over and declared it a 2-day repair. We need a specialist. Replacement parts shipped from Tennessee. Production delays. The whole nightmare. But standing there looking at that machine, something about the diagnosis didn't sit right with me. I didn't argue, didn't challenge anybody publicly. I just stayed. After the shift changed, I stayed. After everyone else left, I stayed. And through the night, piece by piece, I pulled that press apart myself. What I found was a failed shear pin that had triggered a chain reaction of damage that looked catastrophic, but actually wasn't. Most people saw destruction. I saw a fix. So I machined a replacement part myself using the shop tools, rebuilt the damaged section overnight, recalibrated the alignment, and got the machine running again by 4:30 the next morning. 2 full days of downtime became 17 hours. When Gerald found out, he didn't make some giant speech about it. That wasn't his style. He walked over while I was cleaning my tools, stood there quietly for a moment. Then he said, "You didn't have to do that." And I told him the truth. "I know." He nodded once. Then he said, "That's why I'm glad you did." And that was it. No applause, no ceremony, no bonus check. Just 2 men standing in a loud factory at dawn, understanding something about each other without needing to say much more. But after that morning, things changed. Quietly, the way real trust usually does. Over the next several years, Gerald started coming to me with problems before he brought them to engineers. He asked my opinion on equipment purchases, walked me through expansion plans, showed me blueprints for a new Eastern Wing addition. Not because I had engineering credentials, but because he trusted my instincts about what would actually work once those machines hit the floor. And over time, our conversations became less about machinery and more about life. He talked to me about the plant, the pressure of keeping it alive, the responsibility of carrying hundreds of families on your payroll every single month. And eventually, he started talking about his son, Clifton Hargrove. Gerald only had one child. Clifton had grown up watching his father build Hargrove Manufacturing from the ground up, and somewhere along the way, decided he wanted absolutely nothing to do with factory life. He went to business school in Atlanta, built a career in commercial real estate, lived in expensive buildings far away from machine oil and steel dust. Gerald never criticized him for it, at least not out loud. But fathers don't have to say things for you to see them. They spoke maybe twice a month. Short conversations, careful conversations, the kind where both people are trying very hard to sound normal, while quietly standing 1,000 miles apart emotionally. Gerald never complained about his son. He wasn't a man who complained much about anything. But I watched him. And after enough years watching people, you learn how to recognize loneliness even when it's sitting quietly across from you. The plant was Gerald's life. And deep down, I think the thing that hurt him most was knowing he had nobody to leave it to who truly understood what it meant. Then, in 2009, Gerald had a heart attack. He survived it. But recovery changed him. Not all at once. Not dramatically. Just in the quiet ways age and fear sometimes change a man after he spent his entire life believing he was indestructible. His doctors were very direct with him. If he kept pushing himself the way he always had, eventually his body was going to make the decision for him. So Gerald stepped back from day-to-day operations. Not completely. A man like Gerald Hargrove could no more stay away from that plant entirely than a river could decide to stop flowing. But he reduced his hours, brought in a general manager, started preparing the company for a future he knew he wouldn't be able to control forever. And during that period, he did something I didn't fully understand at the time. One afternoon, he called me into his office. I still remember the sunlight coming through the blinds that day, the smell of machine oil drifting in from the floor, the old wall clock ticking behind his desk. Gerald poured 2 glasses of sweet tea. He always kept a pitcher in the office, then sat down across from me and said, "Earl, I want to talk to you about something, and I need you to listen before you say anything." I told him I was listening, and for the next 40 minutes, he talked. He talked about the plant, what it took to build it, the years when payroll barely cleared, the nights he slept in the office because there wasn't enough money for both expansion and comfort. Then he started talking about the land. 26 acres, His father had bought that property back in 1961 for almost nothing, back when that part of town was considered worthless land sitting on the edge of nowhere. Gerald leaned back in his chair and said, "Funny thing about land, Earl, sometimes the world grows around it before anybody realizes what it's worth." Then he talked about Clifton, about finally accepting that his son was never coming back to Gadsden, never coming back to the factory. There wasn't bitterness in his voice, just sadness. The quiet, kind fathers carry when they stop hoping something is going to change. And then Gerald looked directly at me and said something that hit me so hard I honestly thought I'd misunderstood him. "I've been thinking about what happens to this place when I'm gone," he said, "and I keep coming back to the same answer." He paused. Then he said, "I want to put the land in your name, Earl." I just stared at him, didn't even know what to say. Before I could speak, he raised one hand. "Not the company," he said. "Not the equipment. The land. The property itself. The 26 acres this building sits on." I immediately started trying to object. Gerald cut me off before I got 2 words out. "I'm not doing this out of charity," he said firmly. "I'm doing it because I know what you'll do with it." He leaned forward slightly. "You'll protect it. You won't sell it off to developers and watch them tear everything down for storage units and retail space." Then he tapped the desk softly with one finger. "You understand what this ground means." I remember sitting there in complete silence for a long moment. Then finally I said, "Gerald, I can't accept something like that." And I'll never forget what he said next. "You already have. The paperwork's done." Then he slid a folder across the desk toward me. My name was on the front. I want to make something very clear here. At the time, this didn't feel dramatic. There were no emotional speeches. No movie scene music playing in the background. Gerald explained everything carefully and practically. Hargrove Manufacturing, the company itself, would continue operating normally. The land was separate from the operating business. A formal lease agreement would be created between the company and the property owner. As long as the plant continued operating, nothing about daily life would change. Gerald wasn't handing me the company. He wasn't naming me his business successor. He was giving me the ground underneath it, the physical foundation. And honestly, I don't think most people realize how much power there is in that distinction. The entire arrangement was handled quietly. Private attorneys, private paperwork. Gerald's attorney, Patterson, had handled his legal work for over 20 years. And on Gerald's insistence, I hired my own attorney too, a property lawyer from Anniston named Clara Webb. She reviewed every page, every clause, every signature, every filing. And when she finished, she looked at me and said, "Earl, this is legitimate, completely legitimate." So in September of 2011, I signed the papers, and then I went right back to work. That's the strange part. Life just continued. I still fixed machines, still worked long shifts, still carried the same toolbox through the same factory doors every morning. Nobody knew. Not the supervisors, not the workers, not even most of Gerald's own executive staff. The deed was filed properly with the county, recorded legally, completely real, and completely invisible to everyday life inside that building. Gerald passed away in the spring of 2016. His death wasn't unexpected. His health had been declining for nearly 2 years by then. But knowing something is coming doesn't make it lighter when it finally arrives. Losing Gerald was one of the heaviest things I've ever carried. At the funeral, Clifton shook my hand. He thanked me for being good to his father. And honestly, he seemed sincere, heartbroken too, but also overwhelmed, like a man who had just inherited something enormous without really understanding what it was. 2 days after the funeral, he went back to Atlanta. And 6 weeks later, he sold Hargrove Manufacturing to a private equity firm called Viridian Capital Partners. That I want to explain what Viridian Capital Partners was actually like. Not to exaggerate anything, not to turn them into villains, but because you need to understand exactly what kind of people walked through those factory doors after Gerald died. The first major change came almost immediately. The general manager Gerald had trusted for years, a careful, experienced man named Fogarty who had run the plant steadily and competently for 6 solid years, was gone within 90 days. In his place came a man named Derek Scholes. Derek was 34 years old, sharp haircut, pressed polo shirts with the company logo stitched across the chest, a logistics background, an MBA, and absolutely no real experience working inside a manufacturing plant. He spoke fluent corporate, the kind of man who held all-hands meetings and used phrases like operational efficiency matrix, workforce optimization, Talent restructuring initiatives. The first time Derek walked the production floor, he spent 45 minutes down there. 45 minutes. Gerald Hargrove had walked that floor every single day for 33 years. That should tell you almost everything you need to know. The changes started fast after that. Maintenance schedules got tighter. Vendor contracts were renegotiated to save money up front, even when everyone on the floor knew those savings would cost more later. Experienced employees, good employees, started disappearing. Men and women who had spent 15, 20, sometimes 25 years in that plant were suddenly being let go during rounds of what Derek called workforce right-sizing. I remember hearing that phrase for the first time and thinking, that's an awfully polished way to describe taking away somebody's livelihood. Now, to be fair, Viridian wasn't stupid enough to completely destroy the place. The plant still ran, orders still shipped, machines still moved, profits still existed. But every month, you could feel the margin for error getting thinner. Less redundancy, less preventative maintenance, less patience, less room for anything unexpected to happen. And factories, especially old factories, survive on margins. The people upstairs rarely understand that, but the people on the floor always do. I watched all of it happen quietly over 3 years. I kept my head down, did my work, fixed what needed fixing, and I stayed out of the politics. Because after 30 years inside industrial buildings, you learn something important. The people who fight every battle usually don't survive the war. So I watched instead, quietly. And then one Tuesday morning in March, Derek Scholes called me into his office. Gerald's old office. That bothered me more than I expected it would. Derek was sitting behind Gerald's desk when I walked in. He didn't ask me to sit down, and he delivered the conversation in that very flat, rehearsed tone people use when they've had meetings about how to handle difficult conversations professionally. He explained that Viridian had decided to restructure the maintenance department. They were outsourcing maintenance operations to a third-party contractor. The internal maintenance team was being eliminated, including me. Then he folded his hands on the desk and said, "We appreciate your years of service. HR will have your severance paperwork ready this afternoon." I looked at him for a few seconds. Then I simply said, "All right." And honestly, he looked surprised, like he expected anger, or begging, or resistance. Instead, I just stood there calmly. After a moment, he extended his hand. I shook it. Then I walked back out onto the factory floor. I packed my toolbox. The same metal toolbox I had carried through those doors 31 years earlier. I said goodbye to the people I wanted to say goodbye to. One of them was Marcus, a young floor supervisor who'd worked beside me for 6 years. Good kid, hard worker. He looked genuinely upset, like he couldn't believe the place was letting me go. I told him it would be okay, and then I walked toward the front entrance. Derek was standing near the doors when I got there, and as I passed him, he smiled slightly and said, "Don't bother coming back, old man." There was something light in his voice when he said it, like he believed he had just won some small, unimportant victory. That I looked at him, didn't argue, didn't respond. I just walked out to my truck, and from the parking lot, I called Clara Webb. Then I drove home, made coffee, sat at my kitchen table for a very long time. The house was quiet, too quiet. Eventually, I called my daughter Renee in Huntsville and told her I had finally retired. She laughed and said, "It's about time." I laughed too, but I didn't tell her the rest yet. 3 days later, I met Clara at her office in Anniston. I told her everything that had happened. She listened carefully without interrupting once. And when I finished speaking, she looked at me across her desk with an expression I had never seen on her face before. Then she said, "Earl, do you fully understand what you're holding here?" I told her I thought I did. She shook her head slowly. "No," she said. "I don't think you do. Not completely." Then she leaned forward. "Earl, Viridian Capital Partners has spent the last 3 years operating a business on land they do not own." She paused, "And they don't even realize it." I remember just staring at her. Clara opened the property file and tapped the documents inside. "They bought Hargrove Manufacturing," she explained. "The equipment, the contracts, the operating business itself." Then she looked me directly in the eye. "But Clifton Hargrove could not sell land he didn't own." She tapped the folder again. "The deed Gerald transferred to you in 2011 has been sitting in the county records this entire time." Then she said the sentence that changed everything. "The ground underneath that factory belongs to you." The room went completely quiet. And after a long moment, Clara spoke again, much more carefully this time. "Which means, legally, they need your permission to be there." 19 days after Derek Scholes told me not to come back, Clara mailed a formal letter to Hargrove Manufacturing. Not to Derek, not to Viridian, to the building itself. Inside the envelope was a copy of the property deed and a formal request for a meeting at my earliest convenience. Now I want to stop right there, because what happened in the 48 hours after that letter arrived? The phone calls, the emergency meetings, the sudden panic from people who had spent 3 years believing they owned something they never actually checked. That's its own story, and it deserves to be told properly. So come back tomorrow for part 2, because part 2 begins the exact moment Derek Scholes opens that envelope. And I promise you this, what happened next surprised everybody, even Clara. So before you go, tell me something in the comments. What do you think Derek did the moment he realized the old mechanic they pushed out the door actually owned the ground beneath the entire factory? Part 2 drops tomorrow. Don't miss it.